Hello everyone, you're very welcome. We'll just give people another moment to finish logging in. Okay, hello. You are all very welcome to today's webinar, in which you will learn how to modernize your procurement process and to reduce cost. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest speakers and get the presentation underway. On behalf of GS1 Ireland, I'm delighted to welcome Andrew Robathan, Director of E-commerce with TrueCommerce, to speak at this session. TrueCommerce are a member of GS1 Ireland's Solution Provider Programme as a Gold Partner and are supporting us in sharing knowledge about e-procurement best practices that may be of benefit to both our members and to the Irish business community, including both private and public organisations. Joining Andrew today is my colleague Siobhan Duggan, Director of Innovation and Healthcare with GS1 Ireland. If you have any questions at all during the presentation, please post them in the chat and we will take some time for them at the end. Andrew, over to you.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks for the introduction. As Maria mentioned there, today's session is looking at modern procurement processes, how things are changing, and in particular, a technology called Punchout, which is part of that modernization process. So I think before we get into the kind of detail and how that can help, I think it's fair to say that some of you may already be doing Punchout and you may be familiar with the technology. Some of you may have been asked whether you can do Punchout by some of your suppliers, but the majority of us today, this is likely to be the very first time that you possibly even heard the phrase Punchout. So if we start there, kind of why is it called Punchout? So we're effectively talking about the requisition or procurement process that's triggered by a buyer. So if you're a supplier and your customer wants to buy something off you, typically they go into their finance or ERP system, create a purchase order, and then key in the list of products that they want to buy from you. And all that's kind of done in isolation within their internal systems. So the reason it's called Punchout is a technology which allows that buyer to actually leave that finance or ERP system and use the internet to connect through to the supplier's e-commerce solution, so they can have a much richer and more dynamic purchasing experience, which is also a lot quicker as well, because obviously they see in your product information and they can just simply add those items to their order rather than keying them in where they can make lots of errors. So some of you, like I said, may be doing that. There's probably quite a few of you today who are suppliers and are using EDI to interact with your customers. And you might be wondering, well, you know, that sounds a little bit like EDI, so what's the difference? Well, EDI generally tends to be automated, so your customers will have stock control systems and things like that, which will be generating automatic orders with the list of products and quantities that they need, and those will come over to you typically as a file or XML message without any human interaction. So the key difference with Punchout is that the items people buy via Punchout are generally driven by some sort of demand or an activity and not so forecastable as kind of stock items. So the typical items that we see being purchased by Punchout are what we call Goods Not For Resale or GNFR, and items which are used in maintenance, repair and operation, so spare parts, that type of thing. And what you gather from that is generally, you know, if it's a spare part, obviously you don't know when you're going to need that spare part, and an engineer or somebody would be, you know, tasked with fixing a broken down machine, and they'll typically go online, find the right part and order it. Similarly, there you'll notice we've got an example there of somebody in an office environment. You know, the printer might have run out of ink, or they need paper or pens. Again, not something that's that easily forecasted. So they would be another typical example of somebody that would use Punchout to connect from their finance system across to the appropriate supplier to procure those items. So in a nutshell, that's really kind of what Punchout is and why it's kind of a little bit different to EDI. So if we look at the current ordering process, this probably is a useful summary in terms of what typically happens in the world today. So if you think of your customers, they'll typically go into their finance or ERP system, select which supplier they want to purchase from, click on a button to create a purchase order, and then they get a blank form on the screen then, which they have to fill in. So literally, they're going to go through line by line, enter in your product codes, descriptions, and quantities, and sometimes even your prices as well, hoping that they've got all of that information accurately logged down in their system. Now, once they've done that, it could be that that purchase order needs to go internally to their manager for approval, and once that's been approved, then they're in a situation to send that order on to you. But what typically happens is, because they've entered that order manually, they will then just forward you the document or the email. So it could be a PDF or just an email copy of the purchase order, which will land with your sales team, and then literally they're going to have to rekey that order into their sales order system. So from a supplier's perspective, it's really labor intensive, because whilst the purchase order has been created by your customer in an electronic means, actually you're going to receive it very manually, and it's going to mean a lot of double entry or rekeying. But that's why those customers, sometimes the biggest customers that you have, are reluctant to buy from you using your e-commerce store, because as far as they're concerned, somebody's got to key that information into their finance system in order to create a purchase order. So they're not going to then log into your e-commerce store and place that order again, going through and doubling up on their efforts. So that's a kind of typically what your customers are doing at the moment. And there's the double entry where you're rekeying that information. Then if we look at the Punchout ordering process, so there's some fundamental differences here with the process. So it starts out in the same way in terms of your customer selecting the supplier, choosing to create a purchase order, but then that's where the process changes quite dramatically. So rather than them getting a blank form and having to key in each line item, what happens is if you as the supplier are set up as being Punchout enabled within your customer's system, this is where the magic starts to occur. Rather than it showing them the blank form, it'll actually log them straight into your Punchout solution. So that Punchout solution is designed to look and feel like any e-commerce store or B2C facility that your customers may have used in their personal lives. So it doesn't require any training or any specialist knowledge. So as soon as they click to create a purchase order with you, they'll instantly be in a familiar environment. They'll be able to see all of your products laid out accurately with correct images. It could be PDF specification sheets. They may also see your live stock levels, so they can see what inventory you're holding as well, whether that item's available now, whether it's going to go on to back order. And they simply add those items into a basket in the same way as they would a normal e-commerce checkout facility. But once they've finished building that basket, rather than going through a checkout process, what happens then is we actually send that basket of items back into the your customer's ERP or finance system. So those same products, all of the line detail, the prices, the descriptions, all appear magically in your customer's ERP screen. It then may go for approval, as it does with the manual process, but then rather than that order landing with you as an email or a PDF document, it's sent electronically in XML format back to the Punchout solution, and then from there it appears back into your ERP system. And again, no rekeying is required at either end of the supply chain. So it's been a far easier process for your buyer, and as far as you're concerned as a supplier, that order has just appeared in your ERP system for processing, and it hasn't required any manual intervention at all. And the other key thing as well is when that order lands with you, you could be assured of the accuracy of the line data that's in there, because the data that you're receiving is actually the data you've sent your buyer, because it's the information they've obtained from your Punchout solution in the first place. So this does mean that the whole round trip process is much more streamlined, much more accurate as well. So when it comes down to receiving payment for the invoices you raise, you've got a far better parity between the order raised by your customer and the invoice that you raise as the supplier. So invoice matching, there aren't any anomalies, and it should mean a much faster payment cycle for you as the supplier as well. So that's kind of the process behind the scenes in terms of that process. One of the key benefits and the drivers for Punchout is that your customers can standardize the reporting that they can run across these suppliers and get more data out of that procurement process. And fundamental to that reporting requirement are some data standards. So sometimes we see customers come to us and they've got product data, they've got the Punchout solution, but they're not aware of some of the extra little bits of data that might need to be added to their current product data. So the key bit of information here revolves around GTINs and GLNs and something called UNSPSC. So basically, in addition to that line item that gets passed back to the customer's finance system, they also need these categorization codes. So the example here shows the UNSPSC coding mechanism, and it's basically an 8-digit code broken down into 4 pairs of digits. So if you look at the leftmost pair of digits, that's called the segment. So that's the top level categorization for the product that your customer is buying. Then we move to the second pair, which gives the family. And in the example here, you can see the top level is paper materials, the family level is paper products. Then we go to the class, which is paper and writing paper. And then we get down to the commodity then, which is actually the type of paper that the customers purchased as well. So that 8-digit code is really, really important for the buyer, because it means that across all of their suppliers, they can run a uniform report, which can give them the total that they've spent on any type of product, regardless of which supplier they bought it from. So each supplier may have different product codes, but the UNSPSC code will be consistent across all suppliers. And this is a key thing that GS1 are able to assist with. So as well as the GTINs and the GLNs, GS1 can also assist with getting those codes mapped across into the UNSPSC categories, which will get you ready to embrace Punchout and ensure that your data is complete and totally usable by your customers. The other aspect there to cover as well, as worth mentioning, is the pack sizes. So again, there has to be consistency with how you describe the pack sizes for your product. And for that, the ISO units of measure are used. And you'll recognize there things like EA for each PK per pack. You may already be using those notations in your product data at the moment, but that's just another call out in terms of data readiness to use Punchout. So if we look at a typical kind of Punchout arrangement, so it's generally a large type of customer that would have a Punchout ready solution. So if we look at some examples here, you can see in the blue box, these are examples of big organizations that are dealing with some of our customers, and these types of organizations are the ones that go out to their supplier base and say, we want to start purchasing through Punchout technology because there are lots of benefits to doing it that way, and we want to rationalize our supply base. And as you can see, they're all big names, and so generally you'll find it's driven from the larger end of your customer base rather than the smaller customers. In terms of the types of suppliers that might be using Punchout, you can see some names there. These are all TrueCommerce clients there, and again, they are suppliers into some of those big organizations. Equally, some of those we have suppliers that are much smaller, and the technology is great because your size doesn't really prohibit you from participating in that. So once you've got a Punchout solution in place, it means that you can actually present yourselves in a much more professional way. And it means you can go after some of those tenders with bigger organizations that typically would only deal with a supplier if they were Punchout capable. So if we look down the list of supplier examples we've got there, Travis Perkins, obviously building, construction materials, Haley, engineering and spares, Bunzl, that's Bunzl Retail. So again, provide lots of goods not for resale to sort of high street stores, supermarkets. Commercial, largest independent office supplies company, again supporting lots of very large organizations. Troy, again, a tooling and kind of spares organization as well, supplying a varied range of customers. So in terms of connecting those buyers up with the suppliers, they then use a Punchout ready system. So that Punchout ready system could be their ERP systems. You recognize some names in there like SAP and Oracle. So some large ERP systems have native support for Punchout. So a big organization may well be using one of those ERP systems. So and that functionality is available within their supplier system or their finance system. They don't need any third-party software. Alternatively, you'll see there other names such as Ariba. Ariba is one of the leading procurement software packages. Similarly, Coupa, that's another one that we see a lot of suppliers adopting to deal with their customers. And then there are also things like PCOS. So PCOS is more of a marketplace. It's a procurement marketplace which uses Punchout. So if you were dealing with, say, the Scottish public sector, all of those transactions would typically go through the PCOS marketplace. So if you were selling into a public sector organisation there, they would ask you if you can transact via the PCOS solution. So again, using Punchout is a means by which you can integrate with all of those solutions. There's also a lot more besides that list there. But those are just kind of some of the common ones. So if you know you've got customers using any of those solutions, you know they're effectively going to be Punchout ready. And your Punchout solution, whilst you may be approached by one customer, it's a solution you can actually use across the board with many of your customer relationships. So in terms of the glue that connects your buyers into your systems, it's this orange box here, which is the Punchout solution. So that's really where it all happens, and the buyer connects through their Punchout system or ERP system into your Punchout solution, and that Punchout solution communicates both ways. It'll send the sales orders back into your internal systems and ERP systems, as well as sending the acknowledgements and information back to your customer system as well. Here's a particular example of a Punchout scenario. So Transport for London, you know the name. It's a very large organization. So there's around 30,000 employees there, Transport for London. Lots of divisions. So, you know, anybody that's traveled in London will know, you know, there's buses, taxis, waterways, tubes, overland rail. Lots of different divisions and lots of complexities in terms of the different products that they buy, covering all sorts of commodity areas. And in this particular example here, we wanted to showcase uniforms because so they use Ariba. So a lot of purchasing is conducted through that system. And when it comes to uniforms, these can be a little bit more complex than your normal commodities, such as spare parts and office supplies. Obviously, you have different sizes of uniform and different grades of uniform as well. So somebody in, say, a ticket office, as opposed to somebody that was an engineer working on the railway line, would require different types of uniform. Some of that would be kind of have a safety aspect or a PPE aspect to it as well. So if we look at this particular example, it kind of showcases a few different aspects and benefits of Punchout, because the member of staff that's connecting in to do the punch out is identifiable. And when they connect in, rather than just seeing a catalogue of all of the different uniform items across all the different departments, they specifically see the uniform that relates to their job function. So lots of benefits to that, in that it ensures they've got the right uniform for their department. If there's, like I said, a PPE aspect to it, it'll ensure it's got the relevant safety standards and things built in. But also financially, we can put controls in place as well. So the benefits TfL will have through punching out one of our solutions for uniform is that it will keep a track of how many items of clothing each member of staff has had during the year, and they can set limits. So they can say for different job functions precisely how many blazers, jumpers, skirts, trousers, shoes they're allowed to have in the year, and the punch-out system can kind of manage that as well. So rather than just sending over kind of EDI orders for uniform and put them into stores, each member of staff can specifically order the items as and when they need it, but they've got the level of control that satisfies Transport for London's budgetary requirements to ensure there's no overspend within the system. The other benefits then obviously are the member of staff can see in real time how long that item is going to take for it to arrive, in terms of it's being manufactured to order, it might be embroidered, etc. So a really good example of another type of commodity that's typically bought through Punchout. So as we're coming to the end here, just wanted to summarize some of the benefits. So if we look at the buyer in the supply chain, lots of advantages for them. Time is a massive one in terms of being able to quickly build those orders with much improved accuracy. They can also ensure that their staff only see the products they're supposed to be buying. So again, like the uniforms department or individually specified catalogues, much better reporting capabilities. And overall, a buyer in supply chain would see approximately 10% savings in terms of dealing with a supplier that's providing punch-out, as opposed to dealing with a supplier that's not providing punch-out. And that 10% comes from time savings as well as those accuracy improvements, which cover the whole process from the raising of the purchase order through to invoice matching and payments as well. As a supplier in the relationship, it does mean that you can win and retain large contracts. So again, having that punch-out capability may open up new opportunities with bigger suppliers, bigger customers that maybe previously not contracted with you. There's also the time saving, and you're not rekeying those orders, so those orders are coming in to your system in real time and getting processed. And you're also identifying to the customer any stock shortages, if things are on back order. So again, you're avoiding those kind of follow-up phone calls where they might be chasing the order, saying, well, I was hoping I'd have received it today, but it hasn't arrived, because you've communicated that to them live at the time they were placing the order, because they were interacting with your punch-out system. You can also upsell and sell them accessories and things while they're within that punch-out environment, because it's a rich e-commerce type environment. So again, you can increase your average order value by allowing your customers to order through that environment, as opposed to kind of sending you emails and PDF documents where they haven't got any visibility of your new products or possibly alternative products that you offer as well. And then we find that all of this put together then increases the lifespan of the contract that you have with your customer as well, because once they've got this punch-out integration, it's far easier to stay with those suppliers rather than switch to new ones where they go through that kind of testing and reintegration process as well. So, so by having this technology, it does mean there's a lot more solidity within your customer base, and you find there's far less churn. In terms of TrueCommerce, just a quick overview of our organisation. You can see there that we've got 160,000 companies connected within our network. That's across Punchout and EDI. So we've got a massive network connecting up many suppliers. We've got 18,000 customers that are using our services today, 1,300 employees globally. And you can see here on this map, we actually have a presence in all of the key territories worldwide. So, you know, if you are a supplier or a buyer that's kind of got international operations, then TrueCommerce is really a global company that can help you wherever your offices may be in the world. So that's the end of the presentation, the slides. So I'd like to hand you back over to Maria, I think, who's going to moderate any questions that might have come in here.
Yeah, so Andrew, thank you, Siobhan, Duggan here, and thank you for a fantastic presentation. Really, really great overview. It's a technical area, but you made it sound very simple and easy to understand. So thank you very much for that. We have a few questions coming in, and I have a few questions for you as well. But before we go to the questions, you touched on a few points that we felt while we're preparing for this might be worth just, you know, updating or, you know, reminding the audience on, because that UNSPSC link that is often used to categorize products is an important data field that organizations need to be familiar with. So I think we have a couple of slides at the end that we might just jump to, and then we can come back to the questions, Andrew.
Okay. Yeah, so there's an appendix here, the one, yeah?
Exactly. Yes, perfect. Thank you, Andrew. So I know Andrew made reference and he gave an example of the UNSPSC. So it's just for those that mightn't be familiar with it, UNSPSC, the United Nations Standards Products and Services Code, that's the acronym. And it is actually, it happens to be managed by GS1 US on behalf of the UNDP, United Nations Development Programme. And I suppose because we're making specific reference to this for Ireland, because in our health service, our HSE has been adapting SAP Ariba as part of their I suppose finance system, and they've been asking suppliers to upload data, and part of that data set is the UNSPSC code. So I suppose it's just helpful to remind people what that is, and that we also have developed a tool to help suppliers here find that code if they're not unsure of what that code relates to their specific products. So on the next slide, it's just again going back to the example, a similar example to what Andrew gave, but explaining that it is an 8-digit code that allows a procurement, a buyer organization to basically categorize products, so that it makes it easier to go out to tender to say, this is what I'm looking to buy, this is the code I'm looking to buy. And also then afterwards for reporting and financials, it's easier to categorize products. Where I suppose UNSPSC and the GS1 product identification meets is really this example here. So Coca-Cola would fit under a commodity code, but actually the brand of Coca-Cola, so it's a can of Coke, that's the commodity code, but the brand Coca-Cola is your actual GTN, that's your actual barcode that's printed on the product. And then in health, we've given an example on the next slide of what gloves looks like. So if let's say our health service goes to, well, sorry, this is the soft drink still, so you still got that commodity code, but then you've got your brands below that, different brands, different flavors. So that's essentially your GTN. And often these organizations will have their own product code as well. But again, as more and more of these processes are being automated, the need for standardized identification, the need for the ability to scan is becoming more important. And then the final slide is that slide on the gloves. So you're looking for surgical gloves. That's your commodity code. That's the system. That's the code that the buying organization is using to include in tenders. But when they get information back, they're looking to get the GTN related to the actual product that a supplier is going to ship to them or deliver to them. So that's a quick summary, Andrew. I think we can probably go back now to the question slide. And one question, I suppose we have a couple of questions coming in, and I'll ask a few as well myself. So I suppose you spoke about the Punchout solution that you're delivering to the market, and obviously, as a supplier, and a buyer as well, it's fantastic to see the progress, because there's been a lot of paper-based processes or systems that aren't connected. So you're really essentially connecting systems and integrating those solutions. So if you were starting from scratch, or somebody's on the call today starting from scratch, how long is a typical Punchout implementation?
Okay, yeah, good question. Assuming you've got, product data that's kind of so e-commerce ready in terms of descriptions, things like images are not obviously essential, but they just add to the customer experience. So the kind of that you could do it in a very minimal way, or you could do it in more detail. So but typically, assuming you've got the kind of product data ready, we can get you up and running with your solution in generally 2 months. Like I said, that's a solution then that could be used for one or more customers as well. So it's not just 2 months per customer. That's the solution kind of deployment, and thereafter you could onboard new Punchout customers kind of on a daily basis then if you wished.
Yeah, thank you. And I suppose it's not to underestimate that master data bit, the product data, getting that accurate, that gathering piece, I suppose, is so important. And once you have that, then the connection, the technology is ready to go. If you just took the Transport for London example there, where there's uniforms, I assume behind the person, the employee goes online to buy some uniforms. I assume behind on the other side there's a long list of approved suppliers that are delivering product, and that's then shown in this portal. And when you talk about the onboarding of those suppliers, is that what you're referring to, getting that data and being, I suppose, registered on that portal so that they can provide those products and these uniforms to Transport for London employees?
Oh yeah, no. With that one, that would be one supplier. So I might have said suppliers. I meant customers. So yeah. So if you were a supplier, once you've got your first customer set up, if you've got other customers that are also Punchout kind of enabled, then you could approach those, and literally, every day you could, onboard a new customer who could also buy, your products from you. So yeah, with the Transport for London, it would be one uniform supplier, but potentially 30,000 employees connecting in to purchase from that supplier.
Okay, thank you. And I suppose there'll be some people on the call here, they're suppliers in Ireland into the health service, they're being asked to upload the product data to SAP Ariba. You mentioned the link to SAP Ariba as well. Could you talk about how, if you're a small supplier, how does that link work? Where does your solution fit?
Yeah, sure. So there are different ways you can engage. So Punchout is kind of what we've run through today, but for people without those solutions, then there are some sort of halfway house solutions where they still have to prepare the product data, but they have to kind of regularly send that across to, say, the HSE or to their Ariba system, and kind of maintain that catalog data within their environment. So if you just got one customer doing that, then that's kind of, I suppose, manageable. But quite often we have suppliers coming to us where they've started out doing it for one customer, and then they find they've got 5 or 6 customers, all with different Punchout solutions, and then they're preparing, 5, 6, 10 different catalogs every week in different formats and sending them out to different solutions. So that's kind of what they call hosted catalog. It's not really Punchout, but it is something that's supported by some of these Punchout solutions. So the benefit you get by doing Punchout is all of your customers punch it into a single source of your catalog. So you maintain it in one place within your environment, and all of your customers are punching out into your system. Whereas the other kind of routes to working with your customers can be a lot more labor intensive, because you are doing kind of work for each one of those customers and presenting data in different formats, different layouts, etc.
So essentially, once you've got the data and the standards set up, it's really that translation into different environments. So it's making it simpler and easier for those suppliers.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so what we're saying is, if you do your product data once, put that within our Punchout solution. Our Punchout solution does the rest of the translation. So if you had 10 or 20 different customers punching into your system, from different systems and marketplaces. The TrueCommerce Punchout solution actually does all of that handshaking and all of the conversion between the different protocols and different formats, so that you don't have to. So basically, it's we remove the sort of labor-intensive tasks that you might get if you didn't use Punchout and you had to surface up those different product catalogs for each different customer.
Yes, thank you. And so question here, I already process EDI orders integrated with our Microsoft Dynamics system. Will Punchout need further integration? So I think you might touch on that, but maybe it would be worth answering that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, another good question. So yeah, I did touch on it at the beginning as well, in terms of EDI, and a lot of our Punchout kind of customers are using EDI as well alongside Punchout. And if you've already got a Punchout solution in terms of orders into your ERP system, we can generate those orders out of our Punchout solution in an EDI format, so that they use that existing EDI integration that you might have in place. But you will typically need some more data out of your ERP system to drive the Punchout solution. So we were just talking about product data. You want, the better your product data, the better the customer experiences, and generally that leads to higher average order value. So product data would be one of the key areas, and stock levels. So again, one of the advantages of Punchout is that you've got an opportunity to show your customers what your current stock situation is, so that they've got an accurate appraisal of the availability and pricing as well. So so that there's no ambiguity, and then you've got that seamless kind of procure to pay process where all of the data flows back and forth between your system and your customer system, and everything is entirely accurate. So generally there's a couple of extra data points that are needed on top of what you would normally do on EDI.
That's great, Andrew. And I think anyone who listens into any of the other webinars that we host in GS1, it's always about getting that accurate product data. So I really like that phrase, the better the product data, the better the customer experience. I think everyone would agree with that. So we're getting close to the end. Another great question here, how do we use Punchout to reduce costs?
Okay, not sure. Do you know if that one's a buyer or a supplier, Siobhan, or don't they say?
Well, it might be worth answering it from both perspectives.
Okay, so yeah, so if you are a buyer, then obviously you've got that 10% kind of effective saving. That's a combination of time saving and efficiency savings and accuracy improvements as well, in terms of that full procure to pay process. So when you look at the value of some of these contracts, 10% across each one of those contracts could be a considerable saving indeed. If, on the other hand, you're the supplier operating the other end of the supply chain, then obviously it's an opportunity for you to increase that average order value, ensure your customers have got accurate information, so they're better informed. It's a much richer customer experience. You've also got the ability that you can offer value adds in terms of those specific catalogs for different departments within your customer, better level of control, and again, it saves your sales team a huge amount of time in terms of rekeying those orders. And you'll know that if you're rekeying orders into a system, that also introduces the possibility of more errors in terms of somebody accidentally putting in a wrong part number as they do that transcription process, and then the customer then is back in touch with you because they didn't get what they thought they were going to get, and clearly then it shines a light on kind of manual processes when they might have assumed there was some automation in process. So massive benefits, I think, on both sides of the supply chain. So and I think that's really the kind of key driver, and why more and more big organizations are going out to their supplier base and kind of requesting that they implement Punchout solutions, because it's a win-win on both sides. It's it's certainly not a unilateral solution.
Thank you, Andrew. Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And I think while this is the kind of less visible part of the operations of a hospital or a healthcare provider, I think it's definitely where definitely time and costs can be saved. And separate to that, we'd be familiar with a number of hospitals at the moment who are working on the Scan for Safety program, which is essentially scanning products at the point of care. And there immediately the topic of master data, you know, if you're going to scan something, you need to make sure you have the accurate data, and ultimately that links back to a replenishment order, which ultimately then links back to an order, to an invoice. So I mean, it's directly relevant to a lot of what's happening. And before we close, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with our audience?
No, it's like I said, it's just a really big area for us at the moment, and you know, we see kind of huge peaks in activity here, and like I said, at the moment in Ireland, you've got the HSE kind of going out, and you know, because they've implemented an Ariba solution, and it's an opportunity for, you know, the supplier base there to be more involved and more integrated with the HSE for all of the benefits I spoke about. So so we start to see an increase in activity from that segment at the moment, and I think we'll be really busy over the coming months in terms of you know, kind of having these conversations and advising people how best to you know, kind of implement these solutions and get the most out of them as well.
Thank you, Andrew. That's great. And I suppose, as I said, that the time is right to be looking at this now. I think we're going to get more questions, a lot more questions in this area. We are here. I mean, the TrueCommerce information is there, GS1 Ireland, all our details are on our website. You can certainly reach out to myself or Maria if you have any questions relating to today, or you'd like to hear more on this topic or other topics. We certainly will be running more webinars. And finally, as well, this session has been recorded, so in case you didn't get all of it, you can certainly listen back or share with colleagues, and do please get in touch with myself, Andrew, or our colleagues if you have any questions. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.